Chapter 1. The Night My Family Chose Her. I was 15 when my own family decided I was the problem. One night, they believed her lies, laid the evidence on the table, and pushed me out into the rain with nothing but the clothes I was wearing. Years later, a federal arrest, a confession, and a courtroom silence finally exposed what really happened, but the truth didn't bring me back home. It changed who I became. I'm Naomi, and this is the story of how my family chose her, and how that choice destroyed everything they thought they were protecting. Rain has a way of pulling memories out of places I thought I had sealed shut. Even now, at 32, living in a quiet apartment in Columbus, Ohio, a steady fall of rain against the window can still make my chest tighten before my mind understands why. That night always comes back first, not the cold, not the darkness, but the moment I realized my family had already made a choice, and it was not me. In 2014, I was 15 years old. Our house sat on a calm suburban street, the kind where lawns were trimmed and neighbors waved without really knowing each other. After my mother died 2 years earlier, my father, Robert Calder, clung to one word as if it could keep everything from falling apart: stability. He said it often. Stability mattered more than feelings, more than questions, more than doubt. My stepmother Marla followed his lead, quiet and agreeable, always smoothing things over by saying nothing at all, and my older half-sister Vivian became what everyone needed her to be: responsible, reliable, the one who stepped up. Vivian was 4 years older than me and carried herself like an adult long before she actually was one. She handled phone calls, organized paperwork, and spoke for my father when he was too tired to speak for himself. People praised her constantly. Teachers, neighbors, even relatives told my father how lucky he was to have such a strong daughter. Standing next to her, I learned early that strength was something other people saw in her, not in me. That night started quietly. Rain tapped against the windows, the television murmured in the background, and I was finishing homework at the kitchen table. Vivian asked me to come into the living room. Her voice sounded calm, almost gentle. My father sat on the couch, his jaw tight. On the coffee table were items I did not recognize as a group until they were placed together: cash, folded unevenly, a small bottle of pills, printed pages that looked like text messages. My father said my name, not loudly but with a finality that made my stomach drop. Vivian stood beside him, eyes wet, hands clasped. She spoke first, saying she had been scared to bring it up, that she did not want to believe it either. She said she had found the money missing. She said the pills were not hers. She said the messages looked like mine. I tried to speak. I remember that clearly. I opened my mouth and felt words rush forward, explanations that had no shape yet, but were real all the same. I said I did not take anything. I said I didn't even know where the pills came from. I said there had to be a mistake. My father did not ask me how. He did not ask when. He did not ask why. He said Vivian would not lie about something like this. That was the moment everything shifted. I could feel it, the way you feel the ground give a little before you fall. Vivian cried harder then, saying she only wanted to protect the family, that she was worried about me. Marla hovered near the hallway, hands twisting in her sweater, avoiding my eyes. No one asked me to show my phone. No one asked where I had been that day. The evidence on the table had already spoken for me. I kept talking, my voice rising, hands shaking. I said I was at school. I said they could check. I said there had to be another explanation. My father stood up and told me to stop. He said he could not have this kind of behavior in his house. He said he had a responsibility to keep everyone safe. The word safe echoed in my head. Safe from me. The argument did not end in shouting. That almost made it worse. My father walked to the front door and opened it. Rain rushed in, cold and loud. He told me to go stay somewhere else until I could get help. He said I needed to think about my actions. I looked at Marla, hoping she would say something, anything. She looked past me, lips pressed together, as if silence were a kindness. I asked if I could take my jacket. My father said no. He said I needed to leave now. Vivian stood behind him, eyes lowered, not looking at me at all. When the door closed, the sound was dull, heavy, final. I stood on the porch for a second, rain soaking into my clothes, waiting for it to open again. It did not. The house lights glowed warmly through the window, unchanged, as if nothing important had happened. The cold came later. What hit first was the understanding that no one inside was coming after me, not to ask if I was okay, not to ask if there had been a mistake, not even to tell me when I could come back. I was outside the circle now, and the door had been locked from the inside. I started walking because standing still felt worse. My grandmother, Ruth, lived a few miles away, on the other side of town. I told myself I could make it. I told myself that once I reached her house, everything would slow down and make sense again. Rain plastered my hair to my face and soaked through my shoes. Cars passed without slowing, streetlights blurred into long streaks of yellow and white. With every step, my mind replayed the living room scene, searching for the moment I could have changed. If I had spoken more calmly, if I had grabbed the papers, if I had shouted instead of begged. But underneath it all was one thought I could not escape. They had not wanted the truth. They had wanted stability, and Vivian fit that better than I ever had. My hands were numb by the time I reached the main road. My breath came in short, uneven bursts. I tried to picture my grandmother opening her door, wrapping me in a blanket, telling me everything would be all right. I focused on that image as the rain kept falling and the distance stretched ahead of me, longer than it had ever seemed before.
Chapter 2. The Perfect Daughter Had a Plan. I did not know it yet, but while I was walking through the rain that night, something else had already been set in motion. Long before the door closed behind me, the ground had been quietly prepared. Looking back now, I can see how it started, not with anger or cruelty, but with responsibility. After my mother died in 2012, my father changed. He did not fall apart in obvious ways. He went to work, paid bills, kept the house running. What he lost was his patience for uncertainty. He wanted things handled, problems solved quickly, questions answered without complication. Vivian understood that instinct immediately. She was 19 then, already speaking like someone older. She took over phone calls from insurance companies, organized folders of paperwork, and reminded my father of appointments he would otherwise forget. When relatives came by, she greeted them with calm confidence and explained how we were all adjusting. People praised her right in front of me, saying she was so strong, so mature, such a blessing in a hard time. My father absorbed every word. I became the quiet one by comparison. Not because I had nothing to say, but because what I said never seemed to land. If Vivian spoke, the conversation moved forward. If I spoke, it stalled. Vivian handled money, too. Not officially, but practically. She knew where envelopes were kept, which accounts were for what, and when things were tight. When she turned 18, she received her portion of a small family trust, just under $50,000 my mother had set aside years earlier. At first, it seemed like a relief. Bills got paid, groceries were bought without counting every dollar. Then the money was gone. No announcement, no argument. One day, Vivian mentioned the trust casually, saying it had been used up, but that it had helped the family survive. My father nodded, grateful. He did not ask for details. I noticed how often her phone buzzed around that time, how she took calls outside, how she came home late smelling like cheap cologne that was not my father's. That was when Ethan Cole entered our lives. He was in his late 20s, confident in the way people are when they always have an answer ready. He talked about sales, investments, opportunities that just needed the right timing. He never stayed for dinner, never paid for anything, but somehow always had plans. Vivian listened to him closely. When he spoke, she leaned in. One afternoon, I overheard them arguing in the driveway. Not loud enough to draw attention, but tense. Ethan said something about needing more time. Vivian told him they were running out of options. When I stepped closer, they stopped talking. She smiled at me then, a quick flash of warmth that did not reach her eyes. It was small things like that, moments that felt off, but not alarming enough to maim. If I tried to explain them later, they sounded like nothing. A look, a pause, a tone that did not match the words. The morning before the night everything collapsed, Vivian sat across from me at the kitchen table while my father got ready for work. She stirred her coffee slowly and asked if I had seen him take out cash recently. I said no. She asked if he still used the same ATM card. I shrugged. She nodded, as if filing the information away. Her voice was light, but her eyes stayed on me longer than they needed to. Later that day, she followed me down the hallway and asked where my father kept important things. I told her I did not know. She laughed and said she was just trying to stay organized. I remember thinking it was strange, but I also remember thinking it was none of my business. That was how Vivian worked. She never demanded, she collected. In the days that followed, I felt a subtle shift in the house. Conversations stopped when I entered the room. Vivian started checking in with my father more often, asking how he was holding up, whether he was sleeping. She framed everything as concern. I could see how comforting that must have been for him. When I tried to speak, my words sounded small even to my own ears. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, Vivian had always been the responsible one. That was the story everyone knew. The night it happened, the pieces were already in place. The cash had been removed. The pills had been set aside. The messages had been printed. Vivian did not rush. She waited for the moment when my father was tired enough to listen without questioning. Later, after everything came apart, I replayed that morning over and over. Vivian's questions, her calm, the way she already seemed to know the answers she wanted. I realized then that what felt like curiosity had been preparation. Standing in the rain, soaked and shaking, I did not yet understand the shape of what she had done. I only knew that I had been pushed out of my own life without a chance to defend myself. The danger I sensed that morning had finally surfaced, and it had a name, but the plan behind it was still hidden, waiting to reveal itself piece by piece.
Chapter 3. The Lie That Almost Killed Me. I learned later that my body gave up before my mind did. One moment I was walking, counting steps, telling myself I was almost there, and the next my knees buckled and the road rushed up to meet me. The sound that brought me back was not rain but voices, low, urgent, unfamiliar. When I opened my eyes, bright lights burned into my vision, and something cold pressed against my arm. A man leaned over me and asked my name. "I think she is hypothermic," someone else said. I tried to answer, but my teeth were chattering too hard. The ceiling above me was white and endless. By the time the world settled into focus, I was in a narrow hospital room at County Medical Center, wrapped in warmed blankets with an IV taped to my hand. My clothes were gone. My shoes sat in a plastic bag by the door, soaked and muddy. A nurse checked the monitor and smiled gently. She told me I was safe. She told me they had called my grandmother. She told me to rest. I slept again, and when I woke up, Ruth Calder was sitting beside the bed, her coat still on, her eyes red from crying. She reached for my hand and held it like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. "I knew something was wrong," she said. "I just knew." Later that morning, a woman knocked softly and stepped into the room. She introduced herself as Diane Holloway from Child Protective Services. She spoke calmly, like someone who had learned how to deliver difficult conversations without making them heavier than they already were.
"We are here because a minor was found in a dangerous situation," she said. "This is not about blame right now. It is about understanding what happened." She asked simple questions first: my age, where I lived, who I lived with. Then she asked why I had been outside in the rain. I told her the truth, all of it, my words tumbling out faster than I could organize them. I told her about the cash, the pills, the messages. I told her my father believed my sister. Diane did not interrupt. She took notes, nodding occasionally. "Did anyone ask to see your phone?" she asked. "No," I said. "Did anyone ask where you were earlier that day?" she asked. "No." She looked up at that, just for a moment, then wrote something down. The investigation moved quickly after that, not dramatically, not with raised voices or sudden revelations, but steadily, step by step. Diane visited Whitcomb High School the next day. She spoke with administrators and pulled my attendance records. I had been in class during the time my father claimed the cash went missing. At First Federal Bank, she requested ATM footage. My father said money had been withdrawn mid-afternoon. The camera showed him alone at the machine. Diane visited the local pharmacy. The pills my sister said she had found were not prescribed to anyone in our household. The pharmacist confirmed that. Each piece on its own felt small. Together they formed something solid enough to hold on to. When Diane returned to the hospital, she laid the facts out quietly. "Based on what we have so far," she said, "you could not have done what you are accused of doing." I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief that someone believed me, fear because belief did not mean resolution. My father still refused to speak with me. Vivian refused to meet with Diane without a lawyer present. One afternoon, Diane asked if I remembered a teacher who might have noticed changes. I told her about Karen Doyle, my English teacher. She had always watched me closely, the way teachers do when they sense something is wrong but do not know what it is. Diane spoke with her the following day. When she came back, her expression was tight. "She said she had concerns," she said. "She said she noticed you withdrawing. She suspected there might be tension at home." "Then why didn't she say anything?" I asked. Diane sighed. She said she didn't want to interfere in family matters. The words sat between us, heavy and unresolved. My grandmother was granted temporary guardianship while the investigation continued. I moved into her small house on the other side of town. It smelled like old books and lemon cleaner. She made soup every night and insisted on walking me to school, even though I was embarrassed. My father did not come. Vivian did not call. Weeks passed. Diane checked in regularly. She pushed where she could, but every step met resistance. My father insisted Vivian had no reason to lie. Vivian maintained her story, calm and unwavering. One afternoon, Diane sat across from my grandmother and me at the kitchen table. "We are missing one thing," she said, "a statement that connects the dots. Without that, this may not go any further." I understood what she meant. Evidence could show I was innocent, but it could not prove intent. It could not show who had placed the pieces where they were found. "Someone knows," Diane said. "Someone helped." The thought made my stomach twist. I didn't know who that someone was, but I knew what it meant. The truth was close enough to see now, close enough to reach, but it was still just out of our grasp, waiting for the one voice that could finally make it undeniable. Chapter 4. When the truth turned on her. It happened years later, long after I had stopped expecting anything to change. By then, I had learned how to live with unanswered questions. I had learned how to move forward without closure, or at least something that looked like it from the outside. In the spring of 2019, Diane Holloway called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice sounded the same as always, calm and measured, but she did not waste time. "We may finally have what we need," she said. She told me that Ethan Cole had been arrested in another state on federal charges, wire fraud. Not a misunderstanding, not a minor offense, a pattern, multiple victims, large sums of money moving through accounts that did not belong to him. I remember sitting down on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, my heart racing in a way I had not felt in years. "Is he saying anything?" I asked. "Not yet," Diane said, "but he is looking at serious time. People tend to talk when they understand what is at stake." For weeks, nothing happened, or at least nothing I could see. Diane checked in occasionally, careful not to promise more than she could deliver. She explained how federal cases worked, how negotiations happened quietly behind closed doors. She said Ethan had hired a lawyer who specialized in damage control. Then one afternoon, she called again. "He is cooperating," she said. "Not fully, not yet, but he is asking questions about what cooperation might buy him." I felt a strange pull in my chest, a mix of dread and relief. I had waited so long for someone to say the truth out loud that the idea of it finally happening felt unreal. Diane asked if I would be willing to come in if needed, to give a statement, to answer questions. I said yes without hesitation. Weeks later, she sat across from me in a small conference room and laid out what had been confirmed so far. Ethan had admitted to helping Vivian create false evidence back in 2014. He had withdrawn cash using my father's card. He had acquired pills from outside our household. He had helped draft messages that made it look like I was spiraling. "It was not impulsive," Diane said. "It was planned." I closed my eyes as she spoke. Each detail landed like a weight. The questions, the timing, the calm way Vivian had presented everything. It had not been chaos, it had been strategy. Ethan had not given everything up right away. Diane explained that part carefully. "He is negotiating," she said. "He wants reduced charges. He wants less time." "So he's trading us," I said. "He's trading the truth," she replied. When the case moved forward, it did so without spectacle. There were no cameras waiting outside the courthouse, no dramatic confrontations in hallways. Vivian appeared composed throughout the process. She hired her own attorney. She never raised her voice. She never cried in public. During one meeting, I heard her say, "I did what I thought was best for the family." The words made my stomach turn. The plea deal was explained to me in plain language. Vivian would avoid prison time in exchange for a guilty plea. She would serve a long period of probation. She would be ordered to repay what had been taken. A felony would stay on her record. She would be legally barred from contacting me. "It is not nothing," Diane said, reading my face, "and it is not everything." I nodded. I had learned by then that justice rarely arrives in perfect shapes. My father did not speak during the proceedings. He sat behind his attorney, shoulders slumped, eyes fixed on the floor. The court did not punish him with jail time. It punished him in quieter ways. He lost legal authority over me permanently. Word spread through our community. People stopped asking him how he was doing. Invitations dried up. The man who had once insisted on stability found himself isolated by the very choices he had made. The day Vivian was sentenced, I sat in the back of the courtroom. I watched as the judge reviewed the agreement. I watched Vivian listen without expression. When it was over, she stood and turned toward the exit. There were no handcuffs, no scene, just a woman walking out of a room with her future narrowed by ink on paper. Our eyes met for a brief second. There was no apology in her face, no anger either, just something flat and unreadable. Then she looked away and kept walking. I stayed seated long after the room emptied. I let the silence settle around me. For the first time since that night in the rain, the story no longer belonged to someone else. It had been spoken, it had been recorded, it existed outside of me now. But as I walked out of the courthouse and into the daylight, I understood something clearly. The truth had turned on her at last, but it had also turned on the family I thought I knew. What came next would not be about verdicts or deals. It would be about what I chose to do with the life that was finally, unmistakably, my own.
Chapter 5. I survived, but I didn't go back. The life that followed did not arrive all at once. It came quietly, in choices that seemed small at the time, but added up to something solid. After the case ended, I did not feel relief the way people expect you to. There was no rush of victory, no sudden lightness. What I felt first was exhaustion. Years of holding my breath without realizing it had finally caught up with me. I started therapy not because someone told me to, but because I noticed how my body reacted to ordinary things. Raised voices in a grocery store aisle, the sound of rain hitting pavement at night, doors closing too hard. My therapist asked me once what I wanted most from the process. I told her I wanted to stop waiting for the past to knock on my door. We worked slowly. I learned how to sit with memories without letting them decide my next move. Healing did not look dramatic. It looked like showing up every week, answering uncomfortable questions, and leaving with a headache that meant something had shifted. I found a steady job in a marketing department at a mid-sized firm in Columbus. Nothing glamorous, regular hours, predictable pay. For the first time, my life was quiet by design, not by force. I rented a small apartment near a park and made a habit of walking there in the evenings, even when the sky darkened, especially when it did. Rain still followed me, but it no longer ruled me. My father reached out once, about a year after the court proceedings ended. He asked if we could talk. His message was careful, almost formal. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop halfway between our neighborhoods, neutral ground. He looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow. We sat across from each other, steam rising from untouched cups. He told me he was sorry, not in a dramatic way, but with the tired sincerity of someone who had lost more than he knew how to name. "I did what I thought was right," he said. "I know," I replied. The words surprised both of us. Knowing did not make it hurt less, but it did make it clearer. He had chosen stability over uncertainty. He had chosen the daughter who made things easier. He asked if I was willing to come back, to visit, to be part of the family again. I took a breath and told him no, not angrily, not with blame, just no. I said I had built something that worked for me. I said I was not interested in reopening doors that had closed the way his did. He nodded, eyes glossy, and did not argue. That was the most honest moment we ever shared. I never saw Vivian again. I heard about her through other people, the way you hear about someone who once mattered but no longer fits into your life. Jobs that did not last, moves that never stuck, a reputation that followed her quietly, the kind that does not announce itself but never goes away. Ethan served his sentence and faded into a system that had no memory of me at all. None of it felt like revenge. It felt like distance. The real shift came one evening when rain started unexpectedly while I was walking home from work. I stopped under a tree, waiting for it to pass, and realized I was not panicking. My shoulders were relaxed, my breathing steady. The girl who had been pushed out into the storm had grown into someone who could stand in it without falling apart. I thought about that night in 2014, about the porch light glowing behind a locked door. I thought about the road stretching ahead of me, longer than it had ever seemed before. And I understood something I had not then. Survival is not about proving anyone wrong. It is about choosing yourself again and again, even when the people who should have chosen you did not. I do not tell this story because it makes me look strong. I tell it because it is true, and because there are people listening who know what it feels like to be dismissed for the sake of peace, to be sacrificed for the illusion of stability. If your family once chose to believe something that hurt you, what do you think you still owe them, if anything at all?